Another thing that we can talk about is the formal versus the informal sector now. So economically, there would be, remember how we talked about subsistence farming? That's the way of life. That is the indigenous cultural way of life with land resources, subsistence farming, all that tied up with marriage customs and clan groups, community ownership. So informal sector, as these cities started to grow and the population really started to grow, as I said before, the population growth, the largest after the transformation of slave trade and just reorientation from internal to coast, the big cities are growing mostly on the coast. So there's two patterns where population growth has really popped. It's mostly in the higher, cooler areas. It's also areas with water and where farming can be done. And it's also where trade has occurred. So those are the three big things that have shown where these large cities, Lagos, up in here, there's a lot of people in the Great Lakes area up here because it's just cooler, where farming can occur, and also there's populations, a lot of population here. So in the areas where there would be water, farming, trade, and also higher, cooler plateau areas, that's where you're going to have the larger populations. And where these cities are really popping and growing and becoming more and more populated, very rapidly growing, such as Lagos and in Nigeria. There's going to be formal sector, which is the sector that's on the books. People they have birth certificates. The equivalent in let's say the United States would be, have your driver's license, you have your birth certificate, you have your social security, you're registered, and if you have a business, you're going to register the business. Well, informal sector, people are not on the books. They might not have birth certificate. They might not have any of those documents that even show when they were born, where they live, whether or not they drive, and especially their business. So you'd have street businesses. And so this is really common, this informal sector, and due to also to the lack of infrastructure in Africa, there's also this very huge informal sector. That means when you go to places, and even the big cities, you'll find street vendors and lots of street foods and bazaars and markets and people selling their wares, and it's not on the books. So it's very hard to tell in books, if you get a textbook, to have the numbers for Africa on everything, from economy to people to registering different tribes and languages. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about religion. And so, again, we said that in the transition zone here, this would be the zone where the major influence in North Africa, which belongs to another realm, but we're not talking about North Africa right now, we're talking about Sub-Saharan Africa. So in North Africa, Islam is the major, and Muslim is the major cultural influence. And then the major cultural influence in Sub-Saharan Africa would be Christian and tribal religions were varied with the different tribes and the different languages and the different groups. And they varied, but they're known together as animist. Animist being a nature spirit, it's been called nature spirit religions, where the belief is that there is a remote deity, yet in day-to-day life and everything is animated or has spirit. And so if everything has spirit to it and is animated, then this would affect the daily life. And so, and also generally there's healers, shamans, or that act not only as spiritual interceders between the spirit world and with people, but also that they act as healers. They often use medicines and As I said, there's not a lot of infrastructure, not a lot of clinics, and doctors. Doctors Without Borders is very needed and welcome here, where there really isn't a lot of infrastructure in a lot of places and a lot of medicine. So animist groups they continue to have their healers, which can be local leaders too. And then finally, let's wrap up with the great, astonishing growth that's occurring here. It's uneven. It's really uneven. The places that have natural resources, such as oil, diamonds, minerals, phosphates, trees, farming, all kinds of natural resources in Africa. Those are the places that are going to grow more and become wealthier, and the people don't always get the wealth. As I've said before, especially of lands, there's a lot of land alienation. So there's this uneven kind of growth going on in Africa, where some, like Angola with its oil resources, have just been soaring, and there's some of these regions are really doing a lot better than other of the regions. And there's still this lack of unity as a whole. There's other regions that have economic unity, such as Europe and the European Union, the EU, and the Euro, that unifies Europe. Well, there's really a need for unification in Africa, where the countries, there has been some trade blocs established or started, but there still really isn't anything that really unifies the African peoples. And this is something that really could help as growth continues and help resolve some of these issues with the disparities between the places that have resources, the places that don't have resources. So that's going to conclude our talking about Africa as a realm. And next time you see me, we'll swap this map out. We'll overlay the larger map of Africa so we can see the boundaries of the states a little bit better. Till then, bye.